The Zephyrian warfleet emerged from hyperspace with the confidence of a species that had conquered 47 worlds. Their crystalline ships glittered against the darkness of space, arranged in the traditional formation that had broken the defenses of countless civilizations. Admiral Kreshtar stood on the bridge of the flagship, his four eyes gleaming with anticipation as the blue-green planet rotated peacefully below. "Begin the invasion protocol," he commanded, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into standard galactic common. The preliminary scans had been thorough. The inhabitants called themselves humans, and they were laughably unprepared. Their weapons were primitive projectile-based technology, their ships barely capable of reaching their own moon, and their military forces were fragmented into competing factions. The Zephyrians had faced organisms with natural armor plating, energy manipulation abilities, and hive mind coordination. These soft-skinned bipeds would fall within a solar cycle. The first wave descended on a human settlement the locals called Detroit. Kreshtar watched the footage from his command center, waiting for the familiar sight of panicked civilians fleeing before his superior forces. Instead, something unexpected happened. The humans didn't run. They grabbed whatever was available and fought back. A female human wielded something called a baseball bat against a Zephyrian shock trooper in powered armor. She shouldn't have lasted 3 seconds. She lasted 8, and managed to dent the armor plating before being subdued. An elderly male, human threw containers of flammable liquid and ignited them, creating a wall of fire that forced an entire squad to reroute. "Casualties?" Kreshtar demanded. "Minimal, Admiral, but the resistance is more vigorous than anticipated. These creatures seem to lack the survival instinct to retreat when facing superior force." Kreshtar dismissed the concern. Every species showed some fight initially. He ordered the second wave to deploy to multiple cities simultaneously: New York, Moscow, Beijing, Mumbai, São Paulo. The humans would see the futility of resistance when confronted with overwhelming force across their entire globe. The reports that came back made no sense. In New York, human emergency responders were running toward the landing zones instead of away from them. In Moscow, civilians were forming organized resistance cells within hours, coordinating through their primitive electronic networks. In Mumbai, someone had weaponized their industrial equipment, turning construction vehicles into improvised war machines. In São Paulo, humans were sharing tactical information about Zephyrian weak points they'd discovered through trial and error. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we're experiencing unexpected equipment failures. The humans are adapting. They've determined that our energy shields are vulnerable to their crude ballistic weapons at specific frequencies. They're modifying their armaments." "How long have we been engaged?" Kreshtar asked. 7 hours, Admiral. 7 hours. It had taken 7 hours for a pre-spaceflight civilization to begin reverse engineering weaknesses in technology that should have been incomprehensible to them. Kreshtar felt the first tremor of something he hadn't experienced in 3 decades of conquest: uncertainty. By the end of the first day, the situation had deteriorated further. Human military forces were actively studying captured Zephyrian equipment. Their scientists, working in underground facilities that had survived the initial bombardment, were broadcasting instructions on how to exploit vulnerabilities in Zephyrian armor. More disturbing, they were doing so in dozens of different languages, and yet somehow coordinating their efforts seamlessly. "They're treating this like a learning experience," his intelligence officer observed with something close to horror in his voice. "They're calling it getting intel and leveling up." On the second day, the humans launched their first counterattack. It was crude, uncoordinated by galactic standards, and utterly relentless. They struck not with advanced weaponry but with creativity and sheer bloody-minded determination. They used their atmosphere against the invaders, weaponizing their weather patterns. They exploited their own terrain, turning their cities into death traps. They even used their primitive internet to crowdsource battle tactics, with millions of minds working simultaneously to solve the problem of Zephyrian invasion. Kreshtar watched in disbelief as a group of humans in a place called Texas managed to bring down a Zephyrian battlecruiser using modified mining explosives and what they called some trucks, and a whole lot of crazy. The battlecruiser had been rated to withstand plasma bombardment from capital ships. By the third day, Zephyrian casualties were climbing. Not dramatically, but steadily, inexorably. The humans were learning faster than any species Kreshtar had ever encountered. Every defeat taught them something new. Every victory made them bolder. They seemed to have no concept of hopelessness, no understanding that they were facing an enemy that had swept across the galaxy. Admiral, his second-in-command, approached cautiously. Perhaps we should reassess our strategy. These humans, they're not behaving rationally. They should recognize their situation is hopeless. Kreshtar pulled up the latest intelligence reports. Human casualties were significant. Their infrastructure was damaged, and yet their resistance was intensifying. He found footage from various battlefronts. In one clip, a human soldier with a severely wounded limb was still coordinating artillery strikes. In another, civilian scientists were working through bombardment to complete research on captured technology. In a third, a human child was teaching others how to identify Zephyrian scout drones. Then he found the transmission that changed everything. It was being broadcast from a damaged human military facility, a message from one of their commanders to his forces. This is day 3, people. We've figured out their shield frequencies, we've mapped their ship vulnerabilities, and we've identified their command structure weaknesses. Intel suggests they've never faced sustained resistance past the first week. Well, we've got news for them. This isn't war for us, not yet. This is reconnaissance, this is training, this is us learning. They wanted to invade Earth? The human bared his teeth in what their species considered a smile. We're just getting warmed up. Kreshtar sat back, in his command chair, a cold realization settling over him. The Zephyrians had indeed never faced sustained resistance past the first week. Every other species had either surrendered or been completely overwhelmed by that point. These humans weren't going to do either. They were evolving their tactics, in real time, sharing knowledge at a pace that should have been impossible, and treating an existential threat to their species as if it were merely a challenge to overcome. They weren't fighting with the desperation of the doomed. They were fighting with the enthusiasm of species that genuinely believed they would win. More terrifying still, after watching them for 3 days, Kreshtar was no longer certain they were wrong. Prepare the fleet for withdrawal, he ordered quietly. Admiral. His second-in-command stared at him in shock. We're leaving, now, before they figure out faster-than-light travel just to prove they can. Kreshtar looked at the blue-green planet with something approaching respect and a healthy dose of fear. Update the galactic registry. Mark this system as prohibited space, reason humanity. Let that be warning enough. As the Zephyrian fleet retreated into hyperspace, a human monitoring station picked up their departure. The officer on duty grinned and reached for his communication device. Command, this is Observatory 7. The bogies are bugging out. Repeat, they're leaving. Copy that, 7. Good work, everyone. Now let's see what we can learn from the equipment they left behind. Down on Earth's surface, humanity began picking through the remnants of the invasion force, already planning for the day when they wouldn't just defend their home planet, but would take the fight to the stars themselves. The Zephyrians had called it an invasion. Humans had called it a warm-up. And somewhere in the galaxy, 47 conquered worlds received a new piece of information that spread through underground resistance networks like wildfire. There was a species out there that had made the Zephyrians retreat. The humans were coming, and they'd just finished their practice round.